Hi, I'm here with Steve Vest, who has written a new book that we want to talk about with you as part of our authors series. Steve is the publisher of Kentucky Monthly Magazine, an award-winning publisher, actually.
Right.
And we're delighted to have you here. Steve's new book is Unexpected Inheritance. Yay, thank you.
There you
And
go. Visual aid.
beautiful. Love the cover.
Yes.
And I'm just going to let you talk about the book, Steve.
Well, unexpected inheritance. People want to know what I inherited, and it's really not about any. Well, there is. If you read the book very closely, there is a object that I end up inheriting in the book, but it's really about traits and memories, collective memories, things in your family. My grandmother, who's featured on the cover, who lived part of her childhood in Owen County, was well, she was a strong cup of coffee, I guess is the way I would describe it. And in comparison to my father, her son-in-law, he was extremely nice. He was so nice, he was almost too nice, and she was not. You know, she told you exactly what she thought every minute of the day, and she was kind of like a tornado. She was a hurricane passing through wherever she went. And as a child, I said that, I really wanted to, or as I was growing up, I thought I wanted to really pass on a lot of the great things that my father had passed on to me. And I wasn't so successful on most of those things, but I didn't want to pass on any of the traits of my grandmother. And I'm pretty sure that I did. You can't help it. And some of the things that I learned from my grandmother, even though I didn't like them at the time, are pretty handy most of the time too. And some of the things that, that I really wanted to pass on from my dad, like I said, I didn't. So the unexpected inheritance really is the things that you get from your ancestors or your parents, your elders, and that you don't expect. I mean, sometimes I'll be talking, I'll think to myself, oh, wow, that sounds like something my dad might have said. But lots of times it's things that Mamaw, my grandmother, would have said when I would have never thought that I would have repeated those. So, it's about that. And it's also about collective memory. There are stories that are told in families over and over and over again. And every time it's told, somebody adds a new detail until it becomes the truth, but it's not factual. And so I tried to go back and find a lot of the things that my mom and I kind of disagreed about in telling stories of the family. And in some cases, I was able to prove that my mom was correct. In other ways, I was able to prove I was correct. And we spend about the last third of the book arguing about what's true and isn't true. And there's a difference between truth and facts. And sometimes the facts will bear you out, and sometimes they won't.
Well, that's an interesting thing for a journalist to be delving into in this day and age, truth versus fact. What part of the county did your grandmother come from?
In the northern part of Owen County. She was originally from Boone County. She was born and raised in Verona and Walton. That's where she lived most of her life. But when I'm in the story anyway, by the time I came along, she lived in Covington. And she was married to my grandfather, who was a railroad engineer from Grant County. And he died when I was 7. So my memories of my grandfather are not as well-grounded as my grandmother, who lived to be 101. So
wow.
She was around for 50 years of my life, where he was around for 7. So
can you give us an example of something that you unexpectedly inherited from your grandmother and how it has come out in you?
Well, as I was growing up, you're always told to tell the truth and to be honest, and but when you're talking to people, especially in your family, I can't remember my parents ever telling the truth. Oh, that looks nice, or whatever, even if they didn't think so. And Mamaw never told anything but the truth, and most of the time it was me. So the truth is not always the best thing, But I was raised with that, and sometimes I'll find myself letting the truth slip out and hurting somebody's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really like to do that, but I do sometimes. We all do, and and I'm not as good at bending the truth as my parents were. They were masters at saying something and it sounding like one thing when it actually meant something else. So,
how is this writing this book different from your day-to-day journalistic work with the magazine?
well, the biggest difference is some of the stories in the book have appeared in the magazine, but in the magazine, every month I'm limited to 800 words. So that's what fits on a page with art. And so I have to keep it to 750 to 800 words, regardless of what I'm talking about. The next issue of Kentucky Monthly, the May issue, I actually have a story that jumps to another page, but that's very rare. We don't like to do that. We like to keep it contained. Well, so, you can't completely tell a story in 800 words. So some of the stories that appeared in Kentucky Monthly that were 800 words in the magazine form are 8,000 words in the book, because there's so much detail that you just can't get into a tight space. But the writing process itself is similar. It's just that I didn't have to worry about being as tight in the writing and as detailed. I could take off and talk about the things that related to whatever it was that I happened to be writing about. And sometimes I can't do that in the magazine. I have to stick to the point, get to it, and get done with it. But in the magazine, you're allowed, in the book, you're able to wander off and explain that this happened because this happened, and it's related to this or whatever, and give the backstory. And sometimes you can't do that in a journalistic way. But I do write, most of the passages in the book are fairly short, which I like to write in short passages. And I kind of call it, it's fragmented in that it isn't told in a totally chronological order. It's more, here's something you need to know, but it may not come into play for another 20 pages. So it's told in fragments, kind of the way we talk. People talk and they, oh, by the way, let me tell you this, or let me tell you that. And so I tried to write it that way. And I tried very hard to write the book the way that I talk. And sometimes
do you consider it more a collection of short stories or a book with a long narrative?
It is. It's what I call a fractured memoir. It's not really about me. Most memoirs are about the person that's writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the narrator of it, but it's really about my grandparent, my grandmother, my mother, and my father. When I was in graduate school, I'd written a very long piece about my dad when he died. And I read it to my mom, and she said that every single word in it was absolutely positively true. Except maybe one geographic location, we might have been in one other town in Alabama than the town that I said. But other than that, it was flawless. And then I wrote a similar story about my grandmother, who's her mother, and I read it to her. And she said there wasn't a single word in it that was true. It was all made up. It was all, none of the things happened the way that I said that they did. I didn't witness them. There's no way that I witnessed some of the things that I said that I witnessed. And part of that is true in that, memory is a tool of the person that's using it. Mm-hmm. And my memories of my grandmother did not match up with my mother's memories of her mother. They didn't serve her purpose, so they were wrong. Where my memories of my dad matched up with hers, and so they were right. So the last part of the book, I'm going back and I'm looking for proof that what I said happened. And in several cases, I was able to prove that I was right. But in other cases, I was able to prove that she was right. And in my, as an example, in my father's funeral, they played a tape recording of my dad speaking at the funeral, which is a pretty creepy experience. And when I've told the story to people for years, I said that my dad said that I was born on the banks of the Dismal Swamp. And I'm kind of doing an impersonation of my dad's voice a little bit. And I told that story for 10 years. Well, when I was working on the book, I got a copy of the tape. There was a tape recording of the funeral service, and my dad never said that. What he actually said was nearly 81 years ago, on the banks of the Dismal Swamp, a woman gave birth to a 12-pound baby boy, and that was me. Well, I'd forgotten all about that. I mean, how do you lose a memory of a 12-pound baby boy being born at home in the middle of nowhere?
Wow.
It was much more interesting than I was born on the banks of the Dismal Swamp.
Mm-hmm.
But my memory didn't catch that. And so I had a totally different memory. And so part of it is about examining memories and how they're flawed, and where these stories come from and what they really mean. And so.
Well, it sounds like it's applicable to anyone who has grown up in a family, and I don't know anybody who hasn't. So I hope that our readers will come check it out at the library, because it's not available as an ebook. So
no, it's not yet, but yeah, it is available in print.
They can either get it at the library when we reopen, or what's another way they could get it, Steve?
Well, they can contact Kentucky Monthly. We have a website, www.kentuckymonthly.com, or they can call us at 1-888-329-0053. And if they call, I know some people might not be watching this during the pandemic if you keep these up for a while, but anybody that calls and says Team Kentucky can get anything that we sell for 35% off right now.
Great.
And also get a subscription forever and ever and ever for $10 a year, and give lots and lots of gifts. So we're trying to make it as available as we can during this kind of difficult time. And, I hope lots of people will call.
I hope they do too.
Yeah.
You want to say that one more time?
www.kentuckymonthly.com or 1-888-329-0053.
Great.
And I might even answer the phone. I'm the only one here right now.
You're very accessible.
Well, thank you. I try to be.
And besides this book, you have others that you have written that I would say are also probably available as well, right?
Yeah, this is one. This one is a collection of columns. There it is. That's supposedly me on the cover. It's called That Kind of Journalist, and it's a collection of columns from Kentucky Monthly magazine, and most of them I'm a participant in the story. So I was listening to NPR one time, and they were talking to a guy that had been a part of several first-person stories. And the host says, "Oh, you're that kind of journalist." And so that's where the title comes from, because I guess I'm that kind of journalist too. Ed McClanahan from Northern Kentucky, he's a first-person participant in many of his stories. Some of these people have said are kind of like George Plimpton, because I tried out for a high school baseball team in one of the stories. And a lot of the book is about me going on a quest to lose a lot of weight and trying to hike the Appalachian Trail, which I failed terribly at. But, it's that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'm kind of a character in the story as well. So
right.
That's where that comes from. And then Kentucky Monthly has done cookbooks, coloring books, gardening books, all kinds of different things.
Well, you're a great resource for our state. And I thank you for your how long is it 20 years that you've been doing the magazine?
22.
Wow.
Yeah, we started in 98, so it'll be 22 years in June that we first opened our offices downtown.
Well, it's a great Kentucky treasure. And so are you. And I thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us. And I look forward to reading the book.
Well, I hope so. And let me know what you think.
Okay, I will. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you.